I'm Frankie, and in this video, I'm going to show you how to create an Azure function in the Azure portal in 4 minutes. I'm in the Azure portal looking at the properties for my Azure Function app now. I can see that the types of functions I'll create within this function app are going to be Node.js functions running Node 20, and I'm currently running the consumption tier where you pay only for the executions that occur within your function app. I can go over here to see my functions, and I see that I currently have no functions set up right now. Let's go ahead and create our first function using the Azure portal. So I'll go ahead and click this to create a function, and I'll have to start with one of the templates that exist. So I can view all the different templates with the different types of names and triggers that they start with. The most basic one is the one I'll use, which is the HTTP trigger. So an HTTP event occurs, and it triggers the Azure function within my function app. So I'll click that, and I'll get started creating the name. I'll say Azure Function Trigger from Azure Portal. This authorization level is for HTTP triggered Azure Functions. It has 3 levels. The first level is anonymous for anybody to be able to access the Azure function. The default is function level access, where you have function keys and also a master key that will be necessary in order to access the Azure function when it's in production. And finally, the more strict option is just admin, which means only the master key, which is a specific key that works for all Azure functions, must be used for that specific HTTP function. I will choose the function version for the authorization level now and create my Azure function. Now that my function is created, let's take a look at how it works. This simple function will take a name in the query parameters or the request body, and it will give a specialized message that uses that name, or just a generic message that it sends back if you don't give it a name at all. Going to integration for my Azure function, I can see that my HTTP triggered function has a request as the input and a response as the output. If I wanted to add other bindings, which are the types of services that can connect to my Azure function, I can add them as inputs and outputs here. That would create a binding for those services to interact with my Azure function. Going to my function keys, this is the key you need per the authorization level of your Azure function. In my invocations tab, you can see I haven't run my Azure function yet, but once I do, I'll see all the successful counts and errors that occur in here. The logs connect to application insights. And in metrics, you can see more data for analysis and optimization. Within the Azure portal, we can run a test on our Azure function. In this test run panel, I'll choose the key I want to use to access my Azure function. The master key is what I would need to use if my authorization level I selected had been admin. But because I chose the function level authorization, I can use the function key here. I'll create a query parameter, I'll run it, and get my response now. If I want to make changes to this function, I can do so within the portal and save it and run it again. Note that once you start updating your Azure function using the CLI or your own text editor, you can no longer go back to use the Azure portal. The Azure portal should only be used for beginning changes and initial changes to your Azure function. If you want to learn more about Azure Functions, you can find these resources here and in the description. If this was helpful, please like the video and subscribe to this channel for more content like this. And if you missed the overview video on Azure Functions, you can find that here. Thanks so much. See you in the next one.